I was sitting in my car in the hospital parking garage when I got the text. Not from my patient's family, not from my charge nurse. From my mum. A photo. My brother, arms wide open, standing in front of a brand new truck, a black F-150 with chrome trim, dealer sticker still on the window. The whole family was behind him. Mom, Dad, my aunt, even my grandmother. Everyone squinting into the sun and grinning like it was Christmas morning. "So proud of our boy," the caption read. I stared at it for a long time. I had just finished a 12-hour shift. My feet hurt. My lower back had been doing that thing where it seizes up if I sit down too fast. And I was supposed to be driving 40 minutes north right now to a dinner I had spent 3 weeks planning, a reservation at Linden and Oak. The kind of place that requires a credit card to hold the table. The kind of place I had been saving toward since January. My 30th birthday. Tonight. No one was coming. I knew before I even called. But I called anyway, because that is the kind of person I am, the one who gives people the chance to explain themselves even when there is nothing left to explain. My mum picked up on the second ring, her voice bright in a way that told me she had forgotten or decided not to remember. "Oh, honey, your brother surprised us all. The truck came in a week early. You understand, I sat in that parking garage for 20 minutes after I hung up. The engine was running, the radio was playing something I've never been able to remember since. My name is Vanessa Cole. I'm a registered nurse, 30 years old as of that night, living in a one-bedroom apartment in Columbus, Ohio. I have worked at the same hospital for 6 years. I have never been late on rent. I paid off $38,000 in nursing school debt by the time I was 28, cutting coupons and picking up weekend shifts until my eyes hurt from the fluorescent lights. I drive a 2017 Civic with 94,000 miles on it. I eat lunch at my desk most days. My brother is 24. He has worked at 4 different jobs in the last 3 years, most recently at a sporting goods store, part-time. He still lives at home, and somehow he just drove off a dealership lot in a truck that costs more than my annual salary. I should back up. Growing up in Gahanna, just outside Columbus, I figured out early that the rules were different for me than they were for my brother. Not because anyone said it out loud, no one in my family would ever say it out loud, but because I could feel it in 100 small ways. When I wanted to go to college out of state, my dad sat me down and explained very seriously that money was tight and I should stay local. When my brother wanted a gaming setup 2 years later, they put it on a credit card without blinking. When I asked for help with my nursing school application fees, my mum said she would look into it and never brought it up again. When my brother needed his car insurance covered at 22 because he had gotten 2 speeding tickets, they covered it without a single conversation. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I was independent, that I didn't need them the way he did, that this was just how families worked sometimes. I believed that for a long time. The financial stuff started when I was 25. My dad called, voice low, said they had gotten behind on the electric bill and could I help just this once. $240. I sent it that afternoon. That was the beginning. Over the next 5 years, I kept a rough count in my head, the way you do when something bothers you but you don't want to admit how much. Electric bills, twice. A car repair, once. $800. My brother's phone bill, 3 months running, because he had gone over his data plan, and my parents didn't want him to lose service. A cash advance when my mum said she and my dad wanted to take a weekend trip for their anniversary but were short. Each time they would say the same thing in slightly different words. "You're doing so well, Vanessa. You've always been the responsible one. You know how to handle money." As if knowing how to handle money meant it belonged to everyone. My grandmother noticed. She pulled me aside at Thanksgiving one year, right after my mum had casually mentioned at the table that I had helped them out with the electric again, which I hadn't known she was going to say, and she looked at me with this specific expression, tired and knowing. "They're going to keep coming back," she said. "Once you're the one who always says yes, you become the one who always says yes." I nodded. I didn't do anything with that information for another 2 years. I started saying no slowly. First it was small things. My brother's phone bill. I stopped covering it after the 3rd month. He got a cheaper plan. The world did not end. Then my dad asked if I could help cover part of their property tax, and I said I couldn't, and my mum called me that evening to ask if everything was okay with me financially. in a tone that made it clear she thought something must be wrong with me specifically for me to have said no. I started to understand that in my family, no was not a neutral answer. It was a diagnosis. My 30th birthday felt important to me in a way I couldn't fully explain to anyone, maybe because I had spent my entire 20s with my head down, working, paying off debt, building something, and I wanted one night where I wasn't doing anything for anyone else. One night where the point was just that I existed and the people I loved showed up. I called Linden and Oak in early March, made a reservation for 8 people, sent the family group chat a message with all the details, date, time, the address, a note that I had already put down my card. My aunt said she would be there. My grandmother called me that same evening, warm and certain, said she had it on her calendar in pen. My dad texted back a thumbs up. My mum said it sounded lovely. My brother said, yeah, probably. I spent the next few weeks looking forward to it in that quiet way you look forward to things you're a little afraid to want too much. The week before the dinner, I found out my brother had been negotiating on a truck. Not from him, from my aunt, who mentioned it in passing and then seemed to realize she wasn't supposed to. I didn't think much of it. I didn't know how he was paying for it. I figured it was some kind of long payment plan, something my parents were helping with. None of my business. I had other things to think about. The day before my birthday, I texted the group chat, see everyone tomorrow at 7. So excited. My grandmother responded with a heart. No one else said anything. My shift the next day ran long. There was an admission at 4 that pushed everything back. I got to my car at 6:15, still in my scrubs, and had to speed change in the hospital bathroom before I left. I drove up to the restaurant feeling the particular kind of tired that comes from being on your feet for 12 hours and trying to convince yourself it doesn't matter tonight. I was there at 6:45. I ordered a sparkling water and watched the door. 7 o'clock came, then 7:15. The hostess came by once to ask if I wanted to go ahead and be seated, and I said I was waiting for my party, and she nodded in a way that felt kind and awful at the same time. My phone buzzed at 7:22. The group chat. My mum had posted the photo, my brother in his truck, my whole family standing in a dealership parking lot an hour south of Columbus, everyone I had invited to my birthday dinner, all there together celebrating him. No one had texted me to say they weren't coming. No one had called. The photo had been taken by the timestamp at 5:40 that afternoon. I paid for my sparkling water. I tipped $4 on a $5 drink because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. I walked out to my car and I drove home and I sat on my kitchen floor for a while, still in the dress I'd bought for the occasion, eating a granola bar I found in my purse, and I thought about my grandmother's voice on the phone, warm and certain, saying she had it in pen. She hadn't come either. She hadn't texted. I want to be honest about that part because it was the part that actually broke something in me. I had expected my parents to disappoint me. I had half expected my brother to be a no-show. But my grandmother had called me. She had said in pen, and I had believed her completely, the way you believe the one person who has always seemed to be on your side. I didn't sleep much that night. My mum texted me the next morning at 9. Hey, can you come by the house this afternoon? We need to talk about something. No happy birthday, no apology, just that. I drove over it too. The F-150 was in the driveway, enormous and gleaming. I sat in my car and looked at it for a minute before I went in. My parents were at the kitchen table. My brother was on the couch, phone in hand, not looking up. It had that feeling of an arranged scene, like they had talked about how this was going to go before I walked in. My dad started. He said my brother had gotten the truck through a financing deal, but the monthly payments were higher than they planned. He said my brother's credit wasn't good enough to qualify on his own, which is why they had co-signed. He said the interest rate was high, and then he said they needed me to help cover the first 6 months of payments while my brother got his finances in order. $1,200 a month. $7,200. I looked at my dad. I looked at my mum. I looked at my brother, who was still looking at his phone. I said very quietly, you didn't come to my birthday dinner. My dad said, Vanessa, that's not what this is about right now. My mum said we'll make it up to you, we promise, but this is urgent. My brother finally looked up. He said, it's just 6 months? Like that was a reasonable thing to say. Like 6 months of my money was a minor inconvenience I was being dramatic about. I felt something shift in me, slow and heavy, like a gear turning over for the first time. I had spent years being the responsible one, years sending money, covering bills, saying yes when I wanted to say no, telling myself that's what you do for family. And the night I asked them to just show up, no money, no effort, just show up and eat dinner with me, they'd gone to a dealership to look at a truck instead. I said no. My mum's face went through several expressions very quickly. She landed on hurt. How can you say no? We're your parents. After everything, I said, after everything, you didn't come to my birthday. I picked up my bag. I said, I'm not covering the payments. I'm not co-signing anything. Figure it out. My dad said my name in a tone that was meant to stop me. I kept walking. I drove home with the windows down even though it was only 50 degrees, because I needed the air. My hands were shaking a little. Not from fear. It took me a while to identify the feeling, and when I did, I almost laughed. It was relief. The text started that evening. My mum first, then my dad, then my brother. The group chat exploded, and then my mum started messaging me individually, which felt worse somehow, more targeted. The messages cycled through the same pattern: guilt, then frustration, then something softer that was meant to look like an olive branch but wasn't. We're a family. We have to take care of each other. You're not the person we raised. My brothers sent me 3 separate messages calling me selfish, each one a little nastier than the last, and I read all of them and felt nothing except tired. I muted the group chat. I went to bed early. 2 days later, I got an alert from my credit monitoring app. Someone had attempted to open a new credit card using my social security number. I want you to understand what that felt like. I had spent 7 years building my credit score, carefully, the way you build something you know you're going to need. I had paid every bill on time. I had kept my utilization low. My credit score was 794. That number represented years of discipline and sacrifice, and someone had just tried to use my identity to open a new line of credit. I called the credit bureaus immediately and put a freeze on all 3. I called the fraud department of my bank. I filed a report. The representative of the credit bureau told me the application had been flagged and blocked automatically, but that I should monitor everything closely for the next several months. I knew who it was. I didn't have proof I could hand to anyone, but I knew. My brother had been in my apartment twice in the last year and had used my laptop once, at my invitation, to print something for a job application. I had never thought to worry about what else he might have seen. I changed all my passwords. I set up 2-factor authentication on every account. I added a PIN to my mobile carrier account. I called my bank and had a verbal security code added to any account changes. I did all of this sitting at my kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night, methodically, one step at a time, and when I was done I sat there in the quiet for a long time. This was my family. My grandmother called the next morning. I almost didn't pick up. But I did, and her voice was different, quieter, without the warmth of that earlier call. She told me she owed me an apology. She said the day of my birthday my mum had called her at 3 in the afternoon and told her that I had cancelled the dinner, that I had found out about the truck and was upset and had called the reservation off. She said by the time she realised that wasn't true, it was 8 o'clock and she hadn't known what to say. She was crying a little by the end, a small, controlled kind of crying, and she said, I should have called you to check. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. I told her I forgave her. I meant it mostly. The wound was still there, but it was different now. It had an explanation, which didn't erase it but changed its shape. She also told me, in the same call, that my brother had lost the truck. He had missed the first payment. He had also apparently missed the one before it on a separate personal loan my parents hadn't known about. The dealership had begun repossession proceedings. My parents were now on the hook for the co-signed debt and had called an attorney. The situation was, as my grandmother put it, a real mess. I told her I was sorry to hear it. I meant that too, the way you can be sorry about something you also knew was coming. A week after the credit alert, my parents and my brother showed up at my apartment. I saw them on my Ring camera before they knocked. All 3 of them, standing at my door like a delegation. I thought about not answering. Then I opened it, because I wanted to say what I had to say in person. My dad had a folder. Of course he had a folder. He set it on my coffee table without asking and said it was paperwork for a personal loan, that if I would just lend them the money directly they could handle the dealership situation and pay me back over time. My mum sat on the edge of my couch and looked at her hands. My brother stood near the door, which I thought was interesting. I picked up the folder and set it back on his side of the table. I said, "I'm not signing anything, I'm not lending any money, and I need you all to leave." My mum started crying. My dad told me I was being unreasonable, that family didn't abandon family, that I would understand someday when I had children of my own. My brother said, low and mean, "You think you're so much better than us." I said, "I think I'm done being your emergency fund. There's a difference." I held the door open. After a long moment, they left. I double-locked it behind them. I texted my building manager to ask whether I could add a second lock, and she said yes. I ordered one from Amazon and installed it myself the following Saturday with a YouTube tutorial and a drill I borrowed from my neighbor. It took 45 minutes, and when I was done, I felt a satisfaction that surprised me. The following weekend, I called Linden and Oak and made another reservation. My friend Gwen came, and my co-worker Marcus and his girlfriend, and 2 women from my nursing cohort who I had lost touch with for a while and found again. 6 people total, which fit easily at a round table near the window. I ordered the salmon. We shared a bottle of wine and the chocolate lava cake with a single candle in it, which Gwen had arranged ahead of time without me knowing. When she slid it in front of me and everyone sang, I cried a little. I wasn't expecting to. It wasn't a dramatic cry, just a few seconds of something releasing, the way tension leaves your shoulders when you finally sit down after a long shift. Gwen said, quietly, when the others were talking, "You doing okay?" And I said yes, and I meant it in a way I hadn't meant it in a long time. Marcus, before we left, said something I've thought about since. He said, "You know what's different about you, Vanessa? You actually show up. Not because you have to, because you want to. That's rare." He wasn't trying to give a speech. He just said it and then went back to his wine, but I held on to it. Driving home that night, I thought about the last 5 years, all the times I had sent money, covered bills, said yes because saying no felt like betrayal. I had believed, without ever saying it out loud, that being a good daughter meant being available to be used. I had confused obligation with love for so long that I didn't know the difference anymore. I was starting to know the difference. 2 weeks later, my brother texted me. Just 3 sentences. "I know I messed up. I'm trying to do better. I hope you can forgive me." I read it 4 times. It had the shape of an apology but not quite the weight. No mention of the credit application. No acknowledgement of the birthday. I set my phone down and went back to the book I was reading. I didn't block him. I didn't respond. I left it there as something I could return to, or not, on my own timeline. My mum wrote me a letter, handwritten, 2 pages, on the cream stationery she has kept in her desk drawer my entire life. The first page was about my childhood. Specific memories, a few things I hadn't thought about in years. The second page was a version of an apology that kept bending back toward blame, toward how hard things were for them, toward the suggestion that I had failed them. I read it through twice, then filed it in a drawer. Not the recycling, a drawer. Someday maybe I'll want to have it, or maybe I'll open the drawer in 5 years and feel nothing. I don't know yet. My grandmother and I have dinner once a month now, just the 2 of us, usually at a diner near her apartment. She always orders the same thing, patty melt, extra pickles, decaf. We talk about small things mostly. Her garden, the book she's been slowly reading since February. What's going on at the hospital? She doesn't bring up my parents. I don't either. There is a version of that relationship that survived what happened, changed, quieter, but still there. I water my plants in the morning before work. I have 8 of them now, a few succulents on the windowsill, a big monstera in the corner that has grown 3 new leaves since spring, a spider plant hanging near the balcony door that I have had for 4 years, and somehow never managed to kill. They are easy to love. They need things I can actually give. I keep the second lock on my door. My credit score is 801 now. I check it every month, not because I'm worried anymore, but because I spent years building something and I like knowing it's still there. Gwen texted me last week, a random Tuesday, just to say she had seen a rosé she thought I would like and had bought me a bottle. No occasion, just because. I stood in my kitchen holding my phone and thought, this is what it is supposed to feel like. Not the wine, the absence of conditions, the sense that someone is thinking about you without needing something back. There are people who will come to your birthday dinner, not because you covered their bills, not because you're the responsible one, not because it is your duty to maintain relationships through sheer financial presence, just because they want to be there. Finding them took me longer than it should have, because I kept confusing proximity with closeness. I kept thinking that family meant the people you were born to, that love was measured in sacrifice, that the more I gave, the more I would eventually get back. I was wrong about all of that. It took an empty restaurant table and $7,000 I didn't spend to show me. If you've ever been the one everyone counts on, the reliable one, the one with the savings account and the good credit and the steady job, and you've started to wonder whether the people in your life actually see you or just see what you can provide, I hope this helps. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to hold a birthday dinner and expect people to show up. You are allowed to stop being someone's emergency fund and still be a good person. Those things are not in conflict. My name is Vanessa Cole. I turned 30 in an empty restaurant and had the best birthday of my life 2 weeks later with people who showed up because they wanted to. And if that's not a story worth telling, I don't know what is. If you're still here, thank you for listening. Share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. And if something in this story resonated with you, hit subscribe. There's more where this came from. I've thought a lot about the sequence of events, not to torture myself, but because there's something clarifying about tracing exactly how things unfolded. Actions led to consequences, not immediately and not dramatically, but steadily, the way water eventually finds the lowest point. My brother spent years making choices based on the assumption that someone else would absorb the cost. New clothes, trips, car upgrades, a $10,000 credit card balance, and finally a truck he couldn't afford, all of it built on a foundation of other people's yes. When I stopped being one of those people, the foundation cracked. The truck got repossessed, the co-signed debt landed on my parents. The financial house they had built around his inability to be accountable to himself started to collapse, not because I did anything to them, but because reality eventually shows up whether you've been preparing for it or not. That's not punishment. That's just how it works. What I kept coming back to was this. I had been taught, without anyone ever sitting me down and saying the words, that love was demonstrated through sacrifice, that being a good daughter meant being available, that my value to my family was directly tied to my willingness to give. I absorbed that lesson so completely that I couldn't even see it for what it was, until I was sitting alone at a restaurant table with a sparkling water and an empty seat where my mum was supposed to be. There's a kind of intelligence that doesn't come from a classroom. It comes from paying attention to patterns, to how people treat you when you have nothing to offer, to the difference between someone who calls you because they want to hear your voice and someone who calls you because they need something. I had that information available to me for years. I just kept choosing not to read it clearly, because reading it clearly meant making a decision I wasn't ready to make. The decision I finally made wasn't dramatic. I didn't cut anyone off in a single conversation. I just stopped saying yes, and then I held that no, through every guilt trip, every tear, every text that was designed to make me feel like my boundaries were a form of cruelty. Holding it took more out of me than I expected, but every time I held it, it got slightly less hard. That's the thing about self-respect. You have to build it the same way you build anything else. Repetition, consistency. Showing up for yourself even when it would be easier not to. Gwen brought me a bottle of wine on a random Tuesday. Marcus told me I was someone who showed up because she wanted to. My grandmother, who had made a mistake and owned it, sat across from me at a diner and ordered her patty melt and talked about her garden. These were small things, but small things are what a real life is made of. What I know now is that integrity doesn't announce itself. It accumulates. Every time Vanessa paid a bill on time, every time she picked up an extra shift instead of asking for a handout, every time she said no when yes would have been easier, she was building something. Not a credit score, though that too, something harder to measure and more important. a self she could actually live inside. The table at Linden and Oak was full the second time. It was full because I stopped saving seats for people who had already decided not to come.